Hello and good day. I'm Coach Jay. I always like to start my class with a corny dad joke, and today's is this. When I was a child, my parents used to always say, "Pardon my French," after a swear word. I'll never forget the first day of French when my teacher asked us if any of us knew any French. All right, two deep healing breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. One more time. All right. In today's class, I'm going to be just going over a discovery day. This is going to be very 101. So whoever's watching now or in the future, there's a lot of things that I'm going to leave out because betrayal is very complex. D-Day, which is the day of discovery, or the day you discover your world falls out beneath you, is filled with layered profound challenges and trials and struggles and trauma. But I'm just going to go over some of the gist of that day. So Discovery Day, aka D-Day, is the day that your world is completely shattered. It's the moment your entire life flashes before your eyes and everything you've known to be true is called into question. Let's begin by talking about some of the losses that you may experience. Whether the relationship ends or not, some serious losses are felt. Losses can be physical, symbolic, and may include loss of trust, loss of security, loss of hope and dreams, loss of faith, loss of intimacy and affection, loss of self-esteem, loss including your own self-identity. Who am I? Who was I? Who am I going to be? The obvious loss of everything is trust. Trust in the other partner is completely shattered. Trust is crucial to all relationship, and it's usually earned. Whether one is able to trust his or her partner after the discovery and affair is dependent on many things, including one's individual values, his or her ability to forgive, whether the person having the affair is willing to re-earn their trust, support systems, previous childhood traumas or struggles. There's a lot of different variables that go into, one couple at the 4-month mark might be like, okay, you know what? I got a handle on this. Another couple after 4 years might be like, okay, I think I got a handle on this. So a little bit about loss of security. For many, this can be twofold. A sense of security can mean feeling safe and comfortable in the knowledge that all is good around them. Could also mean that for some, the discovery of an affair may result in the relationship breaking down, which in turn means division of property, changes in lifestyle, maybe moving, separation of the kids, losing family. Because, let's face it, when you're involved with somebody for years, you're involved with their family too. So oftentimes their parents become your parents, their siblings become your siblings, and so forth. An affair can damage or destroy one's hope and dreams, particularly if trust cannot be restored and the relationship ends. Many people have dreams such as raising their children in an intact family, or owning their own home, or traveling together in their twilight years. Losing hopes and dreams can be devastating until such hopes and dreams can be replaced with others. I always say, we all have to create new normal. And it's not fun. I loathe moving. I hate moving, but sometimes it's necessary. And the transition of moving is painful physically, financially, but eventually the dust settles and you create a new normal. And I also say that whether you're rebuilding or not, you can have a happily even after. All right. Many people like to, quote, blame someone or something for an affair. And quite often people lose their faith either temporarily or permanently. Statements like, why would God do this to me? Or, where was God during all of this? Or life just isn't worth living are indicative of someone who has lost their faith or their faith in life. There's the loss of intimacy and affection. This could lead to loneliness, which could lead to poor or hasty decisions and subsequent partnerships. I can't tell you how many times I've talked with people who've had either vengeful affairs, retaliation affairs, revenge affairs, or left the person, didn't do the right work, and wound up in a next relationship and found themselves in the same boat because they didn't do the necessary work to repair it before they moved on. Although some relationships may have noticed the absence of intimacy and affection many months prior to the discovery of the affair, many relationships manage to retain their closeness, and the affair shocks the discoverer, who is placed in turmoil. All of the sudden, you're eating, sleeping, and talking with no one. Probably the most common loss suffered after discovery of an affair is the loss of self-esteem. This is interesting because I say all the time, betrayal in your life has literally nothing to do with you. I mean, you could even stretch it and say very little to nothing to do with you. But, we have 100%, we have 100% in how we show up in relationships. And if those are not good, or if those are flawed, or we can do better, then we need to do better. We should do better. We owe it to our relationship to do better. That said, nobody physically pushes somebody off a cliff. Yeah, you can bring them to the cliff, but you don't push them off. So no matter what, you can contribute all kinds of toxicity and negativity into the relationship, but you still have zero responsibility or accountability if they decide to go off that cliff on themselves, aka have an affair or go outside the relationship. This sometimes occurs when the blame is self-directed, with statements such as, maybe if I had looked after myself better, or maybe if I paid more attention to my spouse, or maybe if I was more sexual with them, or maybe if I gave them more validation. Some also take the viewpoint that their partner, quote, chose someone else over and above them because of the way they looked or they acted, or, what have you. And that just assists in our poor self-esteem. Affairs have nothing to do with you and everything to do with the person's lack of tools and what they needed, whether it was external validation or you name it. But what we do is we like to internalize it. What did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? And again, assess where you went wrong in the relationship, but you had nothing to do with the affair or the betrayal, what have you. All right, feelings. Feeling a loss is very individual, and the above losses are examples only. Because loss is so individual, the list may be exhaustive. Now, examine for a moment what losses you feel. It is useful to take the time to identify and acknowledge these losses in order to understand your emotions and your fears. Now that you've started to reflect on what you're feeling, it is time to understand all these feelings are normal, typical, common. That's, maybe in certain degrees and maybe different things at different times, but this is all the typical grieving process. They're not right or wrong. They just are. It's how you deal with trauma. It's how you deal with loss. It's how you deal with grief. Denying your feelings is more harmful than getting to know your feelings. If your feelings are overwhelming and you're having physical reactions when you're reminded of the infidelity or the betrayal or the acting out or the lies or what have you, then obviously consulting a professional coach or counselor is necessary. There's a few do's and don'ts with Dday. So far, we've identified your support networks, the various losses associated around the betrayal or infidelity, and the various feelings which are individual to you at this time. Don't expect these feelings to disappear overnight or anytime soon. A lot of work has to go into dissecting, understanding, or radically accepting that you never will understand. I mean, you can't make sense out of nonsense. Below are some do's and don'ts that you might want to consider. Don't make any major decisions immediately after D-Day. This is not a time to end your relationship or sell your family home. It could, however, be a good time to reflect on your relationship and see what issues brought you both to this point. Do look after yourself. You may be experiencing some physical reactions as a result of the infidelity, such as sleep problems, losing weight, gaining weight, lack of connection. I know a lot of times people have zero interest in going outside, going to functions, family functions whatsoever. They don't feel good. They feel they don't look good. They're not in the best mood. And isolation leads to that like depressive state. So it kind of keeps you there, unfortunately. Do experience your emotion. Recognize that each day will be different, and so will your moods. Enjoy laughter when it comes, and surround yourself with people that you enjoy and who make you laugh. Now, don't forget to cry as well. Crying is absolutely necessary. Sometimes people hold their emotions inside, thinking it won't, they'll be stronger or whatever. But no, if you're told a joke and it's funny, laugh. If you're feeling something and it's sad, cry. They're both natural emotions. If tears don't come naturally, try encouraging them with family photo albums and favorite songs. Unless, of course, that will just bring you triggering tears. So there's tears of grief, and then there's tears that will add to your triggers. So you have to be mindful of that. If you can, if your partner's around, do speak to him or her. You have the right to information that you need to know to make the decisions, but recognize and acknowledge that details may not be useful. Understand that your partner may not always have the answers or the reasons for his or her infidelity or their betrayal or their lies or manipulation, their secret life. They might not be able to even answer you of why it happened in the first place, even if they are around. Do start writing in a journal your feelings and emotions. Writing is one of the most common therapeutic tools used because it helps get rid of the unwanted bitterness and resentment. And resentment's, man, I'll tell you something. Do you know what resentment is? And a lot of us do it, especially when we're very hurt in life. But if you ever go to one of those stores like Lowe's or Home Depot or True Value or Ace Hardware or whatever, and you get cement mix, it's a powder. You mix it with water, and over time it starts to solidify. Resentment, in my opinion, is like taking that powder and eating it. The minute it meets with your stomach gases, it starts to build a wall, and it's so hard to break that wall down. So that's resentment. Resentment is no joke. Do tell your children, if you have children, that things are going to be okay. Don't weigh them down with details. Don't discredit your partner in front of your children. At the end of the day, you want your children to know that both parents love them. Hopefully they love both parents, and that we all love each other despite, the mistakes and the misdemeanors. And this is with your kids. Behind closed doors, man, that might be a whole different story, but just so you don't rock their sturdy foundation. Now, it's virtually impossible for this not to affect your kids, especially if they're under the same roof, but you can do some type of damage control or crisis management with them. All right. Don't take one. This is going to be a hard pill to swallow. Okay. But don't play the blaming game over and over of who caused the infidelity. Especially if you're together and you made the decision to move forward. It's just wasted energy, and it won't change anything. In most cases, there's two sides to every story, and it takes two people to fall in and out of love. This includes blaming of the other party or the third party or yourself. Now, we all know whose responsibility the affair was, so I'm not saying that whatsoever. Absolutely, there's the sole responsibility. But if you are watching this and you're somebody who's reconciling, then bringing up the obvious, other than to hurt or injure, not only stifles your healing but theirs as well, because they're trying to figure out why they did this, how they did this, what they could do to work on filling that void or that need, and grasping onto the proper tools to ensure this never happens again. And if you keep reaching back there and bringing them back with things that are unnecessary, like I said, you're doing both harm to the relationship. Again, don't try to do this alone. Don't try to do this alone. Surround yourself with positive people and seek the support of a coach or a counselor if needed. If you have very trusted close friends and family, although you got to be careful with that, because I can't tell you how many times that came around and bit people in the butt. So you got to be careful with that. There's also other trusted professionals like a pastor or a father or a reverend, some type of spiritual leader, yoga master, whoever you trust in life. Do not get into a retaliatory affair. It's tempting. Lord knows it's tempting. It's like, you hurt me to a degree you will never, ever understand. Oh, wait a minute. You will. Let me do the same thing to you. That just halts your healing tremendously and adds complications to if you're reconciling or if you're not. So it's only really kind of like harming yourself. All right, but why? So there's no simple answer to why somebody becomes unfaithful. It could be a symptom of other problems in the relationship, or it could relate to something in your partner's past. Usually that's what it is. Childhood trauma, lack of coping mechanisms, lack of skills, tools, lack of support system, overwhelming, in the current life or whatever. None of this is a justification, excuse, or anything like that. Rationalization. It's just context. You may never truly know why it happened. Some believe that in order to reduce anxiety in relationships, we focus on a third party to whom we unconsciously pull in. This is called triangular relationships, which serves to keep the issues evident in the current relationship underground. Usually these are three forces that play a part. These are the forces within an individual that pull them towards the affair, the forces within an individual that push them towards an affair, and lastly, the societal factors. I'll try to briefly go over some of these like individually. Like forces which pull people towards affairs or secret lives or betrayal or what have you, lies, includes attraction to others for the reason of power, validation, admiration, companionship, maybe even sexual attraction or excitement. But keep in mind, that's usually the least on the poll. There's excitement, there's risk, there's curiosity, there's falling in love, although there's a big difference between passionate love and compassionate love. Affair love, in my opinion, is not authentic, true love. These could all be described as pull forces. Forces within the individual which push them towards affairs, having a desire to escape or fill the gaps in a relationship, such as boredom or the need for punishment. Having the need to prove one's attractiveness or self-worth or a desire for attention are all other things that are push forces. Societal factors, including movies, TV shows that romanticize certain affairs, novels which tell the graphic tale of these glamorous affairs. I'm going to tell you something. I feel really bad for today's youth, because not only does the average 12-year-old now, this is a recent study, not only does an average 12-year-old now watch more porn in 3 months than their grandfather has all their life, we also live in a very in the moment society. If you wanted to cheat 50 years ago, you had to jump through hoops. And even if you didn't, far more than today. Today, you can download an app and within 10 minutes, you're meeting somebody and having an affair. Today, it's so easily accessible to break trust in a marriage. And I'm not saying it was, hard or difficult or challenging before, but there were more hoops to jump, far more than today. It's very challenging for today's young youth society. So I do have a heart for them. The general public is fascinated with headline news, making stories of public figures that have had affairs. Promotional marketing campaigns parade attractive near-naked models because sex sells, let's face it. Also, studies show that if a good majority of those you associate with cheat, you have a higher potential of joining them. A lot of times when I'm working with couples, I will make them do an assessment of, their friend circles. Is there anyone currently in their friend circles who are either actively or who have a past of infidelity and they're not working to fix it? I mean, if all of your friends cheated, but they're working on reconciliation, okay, fine. Well, not fine, but that's one thing. If all of them cheated and they're still cheating, or they talk about cheating, or high five, I just, have another notch under my belt and I'm still married, then no, those aren't healthy friends. There's usually no one single reason for a person having an affair. There are usually many reasons, including the pull and push forces together that with the influence of societal factors that makes, I'll say, the insect drawn to the web. And once an insect gets drawn to that spider web, it's quite hard to get out of. Types of affairs. Knowing the type of infidelity sometimes makes understanding it a little easier. Was it a one-night stand, or was it a long-term affair? Was it due to a midlife crisis or an act of retaliation? Is there a sexual addiction, or did he or she want the marriage to end? There are several types of affairs which include the curiosity affair. This is where one is bored and curious about the excitement of having an external relationship. They're not necessarily looking for someone else. They're just looking for some excitement. And this happens a lot, unfortunately, in marriages that, go on for, well, there is called the 7-year. It used to be the 7-year itch. Now it's called the 7-year switch. But, couples that are married for 15, 20 years, a lot of times complacency sets in and all this other stuff. And there's where you find the curious infidelities. There's the unintended affair. A simultaneous attraction occurs in an environment outside of the relationship. I'm very careful with this because, excuse my being graphic, but nobody wakes up and says, oops, my zipper was down, and next thing you know, we're doing things. But the unattended affair is, again, that the light was on, the insect went towards the light, it got zapped, and before you know it, you're dead. Meaning your logic was turned off. Okay, I'll get more into that if we can later. The compulsive affair, often initiated by one with a risk-taking and adventurous personality. It's interesting because I read a study one time that said the majority of people that have affairs have ADHD, but not everybody with ADHD has affairs. So it's kind of an interesting study because it did show, I think it was a pretty high percentage, maybe in the 80s somewhere, that people that had affair had ADHD, because one of the things with ADHD is you really crave excitement and intensity and thrill. And those are things that come with an affair. All right, there's the retaliative affair, and obviously it's motivated by revenge and serves the purpose of equalizing the wrongs. Doesn't work that way, but that's what the theory is. It's the split self affair. This happens when the needs of others are put before those of oneself, and the deprivation catches up, usually a long-term affair because decisions are avoided. The distance regulator. The relationship is usually over, but tolerated for reasons that may include the children or security. So, it's a couple living together, the passion wore off, the compassion's not there, complacency set in, you don't talk anymore, you don't care, you're not invested, you're sleeping in separate bedrooms, and you're seeing other people. Out of the door affair, an excuse for leaving the relationship. Now, this occurs when the relationship is over for the betrayer, but wants a quick way out. Often clues are left for a quick discovery. So this is just a coward's way of ending the relationship. So getting into an affair, which is why this is a small niche, because the majority of people that get into affairs don't want to end the relationship they're in. Empty nest affairs. This is where couples have lived their lives around children and found that their empty nest is too empty and too lonely. Sexual addiction. This is big because it just adds different layers and complexities to acting out. But when the couple's sexual drive is, now I'm going to tell you something. I was actually getting ready for this class and I was doing a little bit of just quick research, and I don't like how I found this sentence, but I'm going to tell you how I don't like it. This sentence says, when the couple's sex drive is not equalized, the betrayer goes in search of sexual satisfaction outside the relationship. it does say, although sexual addiction is less about sex and more about other factors, one of the things I wanted to say is addiction is addiction is addiction. So if somebody's addicted to meth, it's not that they love meth, it's that they love the feeling meth gives them. You could be addicted to whatever, and it's not necessarily the object, it's what that object gives them. So people that have a sexual addiction, a lot of it's the thrill of the kill. I call it the cheetah effect. A lot of times cats in general, they love hunting for things, and once they hunt for things and it's dead, they have no interest. So a lot of times with actual serial cheaters, there's a lot of times where they'll go through with the act, no doubt, but there's also a lot of times where once they quote connect with somebody, they're like, I'm not interested, because it was so exciting to create an ad, create a profile, lie about who you are, plan your meeting, meet up with somebody while your heart's beating, and there's a thrill and there's excitement, and then you see them, you're like, okay, the excitement's gone. There's intimacy avoiders. Being intimate with someone outside the relationships helps retain distance from your partner. It's a means of staying absent. There's conflict, the conflict avoider. So an affair to control and diffuse anger and avoid arguments and difference of opinion. So there's a lot of different types of affairs. Again, none of them are excusable, rational, nothing whatsoever. Who has affairs? In my opinion, if you're breathing, you possibly are, you could. And if you're watching this and saying, oh my God, never, there's a good chance you never will. Good chance, especially if you're watching this and you did some work. But as Peggy always says, her dad says, you're not dead yet. So never say never. How many times have you heard people say it will never happen to us? Never happen in my marriage, never happen in our relationship. Maybe you've said that to yourself. It's widely thought that affairs can only occur in bad or unhealthy relationships, but that is absolutely a myth. Sadly, no one is immune to infidelity. Monogamous relationships are what most people say they believe in and look for partners with the same beliefs and values. However, having these beliefs and values does not prevent large numbers of people from having extramarital affairs, because many people don't intend to have the affair in the first place. It's just life factors come in, whether that's previous factors, current factors, or both of them together, causing the perfect storm. Research has shown that affairs happen in both healthy and unhealthy relationships, more so in couples that had brief courtships for whatever reason. If couples have just court for a very short time and then get into something serious or marriage, there's a higher tendency of betrayal in those relationships. Usually it happens the medium age, or it's between 20s and 40s. They're higher when both partners work long hours. They usually happen with coworkers within the workplace, because your work spouse, you see them oftentimes far more than your house spouse. And oftentimes with a friend or a family member. So it's usually with somebody that you know. Again, not all the time. These aren't broad sweeping statements. These are just usually. It therefore appears that even the most unlikely couple is not immune from infidelity occurring in their relationship and the subsequent disruption to their lives and the lives of those they care about. So affairs happen to all kinds of people in all kinds of walk of life. Very few are immune to it. I mean, for many reasons. So how common are affairs? Well, conservative estimates are that about 60% of men and 45% of women will have an extramarital affair. This ranges from study to study. So, but there's only about a 15-point margin. Now, a lot of studies say that women's averages are much higher, but they're not as honest on these surveys. So there's a lot of studies that say it's about 50-50. Considering that affairs happen not only in marital relationships, but also in, quote, committed relationships as well, there is compelling evidence that the incidence of infidelity is increasing. And like I said, in today's day and age where it's so easy, we have social media, and we have all these dating apps and hookup apps, it's just going to get easier as time goes to betray. So it's kind of sad. Understanding the prevalence of affairs within our society helps give us more realistic perspective when trying to understand why our partner strayed. Having an understanding of how of just how others are in or have been in the same situation can sometimes alleviate feelings of isolation or failure. And there's consequences to all this. There's many, many, many consequences. With infidelity comes consequences, period. I mean, many people are impacted. You know, if we were to step outside and look for a moment, we may be able to see just how people are affected. So first of all, for the betrayer itself, he or she has learned to be an actor in order to be not suspected. So you know, you have to become someone that you're not. After being found out, there's feelings of shame, guilt, despair, confusion. Those are all present. In most cases, the betrayer is forced into making quick decisions between two relationships. With that choice come huge impacts for the betrayer, including many of the losses described by the person betrayed. Sometimes the power and control is immediately reversed in the relationship. I just say I witness it all the time. Once D-Day comes, now all of a sudden their partner puts them in like a mental, physical, emotional prison for years, you know, which I understand why they do that. They're not in a good space, but now nobody is, you know, so it's not, the betrayer has consequences, lots of consequences, even if that's never, ever, ever being found out, except guilt on their dying bed. There's consequences there. There's oftentimes the betrayer has to sleep on the couch, or the betrayer has to move out, and then they have to get an apartment and spend more money, and that's a consequence. Oftentimes they are separated, and because of infidelity in many states, the person that was unfaithful is frowned upon in the court's eyes. They're not going to give you kids because they look at it as a moral judgment. 50% of romantic affairs end in divorce or separation, with 25% of romantic affairs resulting in marriage. However, only 75% of these marriages end in divorce. Basically, what they're saying is that if there is any type of marriage from an affair, I think there's 1 out of 1,000 wind up being together relatively stable. If there's children involved, their young lives are instantly changed, resulting in an emotional and emotional and behavioral reactions. So many times before I was a coach, I was a teacher, and I can't tell you how many times as a teacher the kids would come to school completely dysregulated, acting out, uncharacteristic, and come to find out, you know, there was some infidelity that was found out in the home. This does affect children, even if they don't know about it, because your energy changes and kids can pick up on your energy. It is rare for children not to become involved either indirectly or directly in the, especially if there's a separation. You know, if you have kids and there's a separation, kids don't understand this isn't my fault. Just like adults, we take on some of the blame for the affair. Kids take on the blame for parents splitting up. It is the beginning of a completely new lifestyle and environment for the kids if you have kids. There's other consequences. Let's just say there's diseases. Other consequences are being arrested. I mean, you know, I was just talking to a CEO the other day who lost her job. And now she was the primary breadwinner. So, I mean, there's consequences with affairs. Absolutely. Things that you see and things that you don't see. So one topic I did not get to today is the topic of grief and the stages post D-Day. So although I have that topic in an upcoming class, I won't talk about it here, but there is a profound amount of grief in D-Day. You probably heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I believe, who has the 7 stages of grief. Then there's the 11 stages of grief. There's a lot of grief, and they do not come one after the other. Sometimes it's a tightly wound rubber band ball where you're feeling 2 or 3 stages at once. Grief is a huge part of the healing journey after betrayal, and betrayal grief sucks. Now, grief in general sucks. Anytime you lose someone, it sucks. but betrayal grief just it's just different. It's a different kind of suckiness, if I can say that word professionally. All right, I hope you got something out of this class. And until next time, have a wonderful day.